Hi, my name is Jordan Henry, and today I'm doing my video blog on Milton Friedman. For those of you who are unfamiliar with who he was an economist and statistician who taught at the University of Chicago and was also the leader of the Chicago School of Economics. He was highly influential, particularly throughout the 1960s when he developed his new approaches to economics. I'm also going to give you guys a quick briefing on his theory on capitalism and freedom. Friedman believed in a free society with limited government involvement. He believed that people should do things voluntarily rather than through coercion. He believed that forcing anyone to act away or do something was taking away from their freedom to decide for themselves. He believed in a capitalist economy rather than a socialist economy. Within capitalism, he saw the opportunity for societies to grow and for people to benefit from one another through free trade and a free market. He believed that the freedom allowed for people to express themselves and allowed for innovation. An example he used during an interview he had was Einstein and Henry Ford. He stated that great achievements in society weren't assigned by a government bureau. Einstein didn't come up with his theory because he was told to, and neither did Henry Ford with his development of Ford automobiles. Friedman did, however, believe that the existence of a free market didn't mean the elimination of a government. On the contrary, actually, he believed that government is essential both as a forum for determining the rules of the game and as an umpire to interpret and enforce the rules decided on. In an interview, he used examples such as the pollution of power plants and the pollution of cars as an issue that needs to be government regulated because of their magnitude and different individuals that are affected by it. But overall, he did believe in a free market in which people were allowed to determine their supply and demand and whom they might trade with. Now, the argument is, be it resolved, that Milton Friedman's concept of free enterprise is the basis for the financial crisis and near collapse of capitalism in the 21st century. I am arguing against that statement. Many people believe that the economy has somewhat flatlined. They believe that it's contracting rather than expanding, even though politicians claim that it's getting better. Although I do agree with that, I don't necessarily believe that it's completely because of Friedman's concept of free enterprise, but rather because of poor judgment on the part of individuals involved in the market. The financial crisis of the 21st century was described as the Great Recession and considered the worst since the Great Depression. It is heavily because of the collapse of large financial institutions, the bailout of banks by national governments, and downturn in stocks. Friedman's theory of free enterprise laid down the foundation for us to work freely and succeed as much as we ourselves wanted to. Unfortunately for us, though, certain individuals in today's society have abused such rights and therefore eventually led to our financial crisis. Friedman stated that every society is greedy regardless of if they are highly governed, like countries ran like Russia and China, or if they're very liberal. He believed that all individuals act in self-interest, but in doing so, we can also benefit from one another. With that being said, I believe that the financial crisis occurred because of unethical acts and greed among societies. Individuals began to think too much about themselves and their benefits rather than the long-term effects these decisions might have. An example would be the credit rating agencies and investors who failed to accurately price the risk involved with financial movements made by consumers. The failure to do so might have benefited the suppliers, however, it affected consumers on a financial basis and put them off track. These acts have a lot to do with personal characters and mental models. It is a basis of how people act to benefit themselves, but however affect others. Free enterprise simply allowed for these individuals to capitalize on opportunities. However, they abused the privilege in a dishonest manner that was not properly regulated by the government. As well, speaking of the government, it is also believed that the government did not properly adjust their regulatory practices to address the 21st century's financial markets. Friedman did not believe in government regulations. He believed that it limited people from making free choices and forced them to abide by regulations. The key word there is force, which is something that Friedman believed took away from our freedom. In this case, the regulatory practices applied by the government were not suitable and therefore ended up bringing down the economy because of its instability. It's therefore the fault of the government and its regulations rather than the Free Enterprise Act. Had the government been able to adjust itself according to times, the financial market would be able to function a lot better according to its practices. Another highlighted issue that caused the financial crisis was the easy credit conditions. The US Federal Reserves, which is government ran, lowered interest rates from roughly 6.5% to 1% in order to encourage borrowing. Once again, against Friedman's theory, it is the government who issued these rates and not the cause of the free enterprise. Friedman believed that the government regulations forced people to follow suit and lured them consumers into borrowing money that they could not afford to pay back later on. Rather than setting up their own personal rates that would benefit the banks and the consumers but also maintain a loan regulation among borrowers, the government set up rates they knew would eventually come back to bite them in the rear. It is easy to point the finger at Friedman's theory of free enterprise because of its leniency and its allowance for people within the market to move freely. However, a lot of the problems can be pointed towards the leniency of the government to allow these individuals to act unethically and affect the economy in the long run. Friedman did believe in government assistance to be the umpire and regulate what took place, to an extent, however. In this case, the government found itself in a crisis and needed to bail itself out in the short run. With that goal in mind, they implemented regulations and allowed for acts to increase their current economy, or at least make it seem like they were doing well at the time. I believe that the issue once again lies within the government. Had they been more honest with their situation and dealt with it properly, even though they might ruin their country's image, it would eventually regain structure while still allowing for a free market at the end of the day. Overall, it can be argued that the concept of free market did allow for us to harm the economy, but however, it is still our fault that it happened. We ourselves as consumers and producers allowed for our greediness to reign over priorities and dug ourselves into holes deeper than we can climb out. Our personal characters were manipulated by government given rates which influenced us to embark on ventures we could not afford at the end of the day. The government did not regulate procedures or rates in order to maintain stability in the market. Friedman clearly stated that we act out of self-interest at the end of the day. Therefore, it was in our nature to benefit ourselves as much as we could without directly thinking of consequences. It is said that you give them an inch and they will take a mile. That means that if you allow someone to do something, we will do it to their full extent and even more. That being said, that is the basis for why Friedman still believed in some government regulation. In this case, the government regulation was simply poor. If the government had properly played its part in regulating while still allowing the market to work freely, not only would it maintain order between consumers and producers, but it would still allow for innovation and the right to embark on ventures of your choice at your own expense. That's the end of my blog. I hope that you guys agree with my statements, and I thank you for your time.